Hi everyone. This video is a very special book review that I am doing in remembrance of September 11th, 2001. This, I guess, would be my second annual memorial video in regards to September 11th, and I think I want to continue this every year until further notice. The idea of making a memorial book review video for September 11th was actually part of a bigger project that I was doing, which was going back and reflecting on events that occurred during my childhood, but looking upon them with the eyes and mindset of an adult. So the three major events that occurred during my childhood that I am reflecting on were Columbine, which happened in April 1999. I was about 9 years old. I was going to be 10 that year. September 11th, and at that time I was 12 years old. I had just turned 12 the month before. And finally, the JonBenet Ramsey case, and I was about 7 years old when that occurred. So after I did this 3 or 4 part video series last year, I still had more that I wanted to learn. I still had more questions that I wanted to figure out, or questions that came about when I was reading every book. And I was very inspired by some of the stories I read, though a lot of them were tragic. I just wanted to hear more. I wanted to hear more about people's experiences. So this year, which will be the 21st anniversary of September 11th, because last year was the 20th, I'm going to read review 2 books, possibly 3, but I'm a little crunched on time, so I'm definitely going to be reviewing 2. I just got 1 book today, which I may review next year, and it's called We're Not Leaving, 9/11 Responders Tell Their Stories of Courage, Sacrifice, and Renewal, and it was written by Benjamin J. Luft, MD. It's basically the accounts of, I guess, his patients who he had to see after the September 11th tragedy. But this book is possibly for next year. Today's book that I'm going to be reviewing is this very beautiful, powerful book with amazing images and also amazing words. And the title of this book is World Trade Center, The Giants That Defied the Sky. And the preface is by Mike Wallace, and the text is by Peter Skinner. Now, what I really found that was interesting every time I was ordering books about September 11th, for some reason, I would always end up with a first edition copy of either a book that was published the year the tragedy happened, or a book that was published the year after. I don't know how I got so fortunate, why the universe sent me first edition copies, but I'm very grateful, and it's all so dear to my heart. So this book right here, I want to say it was published in 2002, but I'm actually not sure. But when I looked it up initially, I believe the publication was 2002. It was printed in Italy by Rotalito Lombarda. The text is by Peter Skinner, and there are a bunch of different images from, I want to say, various photographers. So, before I get into this book review, let me tell you a little bit about the authors. I couldn't find much online. I tried to find websites and all of these different things. So the most information I could find is actually in the back of the book. Now, mind you, this was published in 2002. So this was 20 years ago. So this information is basically kind of outdated. But it says Peter Skinner Born and educated in Great Britain, has a degree in modern history from Oxford University. A long-time resident of Greenwich, is it Greenwich or Greenwich? I don't know. Village, he has witnessed both the building and destruction of the World Trade Center. An active freelance writer and editor, Skinner has specialized in New York City affairs, writing and editing material for federal, state, and city agencies and for many universities in the New York region. Mike Wallace, co-author of the Pulitzer Prize-winning 1999 Gotham, A History of New York City to 1898, is Distinguished Professor of History at John Jay College of Criminal Justice, City University of New York. He is also Director of the Gotham Center for New York City History at the CUNY, I guess it's CUNY or SUNY, Graduate School. And then there's Giorgio Tartaro, studied, I don't know who that is. Who is he? Hold up. I need to figure out who this Giorgio is. I want to say he's the publisher, but don't quote me on that. I actually don't know who Giorgio is. So, Giorgio Tartaro studied modern literature at Milan State University and for years has been involved in the study and analysis of the world of design. He teaches at Milan Polytechnic and writes for several design industry publications. So in the flaps, it says the front covers, which is very beautiful. On the front cover, it says, "Bright sunshine lights up the verticality and majesty of the Twin Towers, colossal pillars of New York and world finance." And then on the back, it says, "Nocturne in black and gold, the Twin Towers are reflected in the waters of the Hudson River before a curtain of buildings was built around their feet." Now, mind you, I believe the name of this book changed. It didn't have the subtitle. It just said World Trade Center, but it didn't have the giants that defied the sky. It also, of course, was written before the newer tower was built, the One World Trade Center. They were still, I guess, at this time, contemplating whether they should build a new tower or if it should just be like lights symbolizing the towers that stood, or if it should be a memorial garden. So at that time, they were still trying to figure out what to do. This original tower, I want to say it had the exact measurements. It was like 1,360 feet. I don't know if it's 1,360 feet or 1,306 feet, but the One World Trade Center is 1,776 feet. They had these exact measurements because that, of course, is the year that the United States, I guess, got their independence and was founded. So they wanted it to be somewhat patriotic. If you look at the reviews of this book on Amazon, there's pretty good reviews. The only one-star reviews that I've come across were from a person that wanted more pictures and a person that was like, "I got the same book twice. You changed the title. How shady of you." But other than that, everybody enjoyed it, and I really enjoyed it. This book has very beautiful pictures. So I'm going to try to show you as many as I can. I like how some of the pages would come out. So this right here, which is really sad. Let me turn this light so you can see. This right here is the World Trade Center after it was destroyed. Yeah. the Twin Towers. But when you open up the flap, oh shoot, I don't want to damage the book. It opens up like this, and it shows them in all of their majesty. Look how beautiful they are. So beautiful. Ooh, hold up. I feel like one of those teachers, where they're showing the book to the class. But really, if you're into photography, if you're into just beautiful images or powerful images, I highly recommend this book. You will not be disappointed. You get to see the towers from all different angles and not too many words, just enough pictures. I think it's a beautiful balance. So, the first part of the book basically talks about New York, the spirit of New York, the energy of New York, and it goes into the history of what New York was like before the towers, how the towers changed the landscape of Manhattan. The introduction. These are the towers. Introduction. New York, the fabled city with the dramatic skyline, beacon for the best and the brightest, for the fortune seeker, the immigrant, for anyone in search of opportunity. But New York is young and has to create its own myths. New York does this superbly and believes absolutely in its own, its grandiose projections. New Yorkers' lives are shaped by images. They are convinced the city offers the newest, the smartest, and the coolest. They speak in superlatives, sure that New York is the biggest and the best. Its ideas and products shape the world, and the world persuades them this is true. I thought that was pretty interesting because I've never been to New York. Most of what I knew about New York was what was exposed to me through television as a child, even if that was real or not, I don't know. When I thought of New York before September 11th, all I thought of was Broadway. I didn't even know as a child there were like all these different cities in New York State. Like when they said New York, I just thought of New York City. I just thought NYC. I didn't know the layout. I didn't know all of that. I just thought of NYC, Times Square, and Broadway. And that was all I knew before September 11th. But I love hearing about how people that grew up there know their town like the back of their hand. Every single city has its own special energy that you can't really describe unless you've either grown up there your whole life or you've lived there for a long period of time. I can say the same about St. Louis. Like, yeah, I might trash talk it and all of that, but I know how it operates. I know the vibe I feel when I'm here. I know that if you know one person, you know at least 3 other people. Or if you have a person with one hairstyle, you probably know their relatives. It's just a very little big town. And this picture right here, it says the Twin Towers frame the Woolworth Building, which I guess was constructed in 1913. The Cathedral of Commerce, designed by Gilbert Cass. To the right is One World Financial Center. So that's the picture I was showing. It says, but myth and reality and symbol and substance were beginning to separate even before the brilliant sunny morning of September 11, 2001. The dot-com world was deflating like a punctured balloon. People who normally vacation in Europe announced sudden urgent needs to visit their parents in the Midwest. The thin, nervy models were a little thinner and considerably more nervy. And the film shoots on the streets served their crews bagels and cream cheese rather than brioches and imported jams. But New York still held reality at bay. This was merely a temporary economic downturn, a useful correction. The system was shaking out the fat, tensing up for the next forward surge. Real trouble occurred only elsewhere. Horrific events in Rwanda, in Serbia, in Bosnia, and Kosovo. The frequent flare-ups in the Israel-Palestine confrontation and the occasional flare-ups in Northern Ireland were far away, almost unreal. And on this side, it has a picture of the top, one of the towers during impact. I don't know how they got so close or if they edited this, but this is very disturbing. Like it's just like boom. Now, what I feel was a very strange twist of fate, which happened earlier today. I was running late for work. I woke up very late and I had to catch a Lyft to work because I missed all of my buses. And my Lyft driver, I was telling him that I was going to be doing a book review for my annual September 11th book review. And he said, you know, this is going to sound crazy, but me and him were talking about how we were contemplating that it was an inside job and there was just more involved. So ironically, this guy had been in the Navy. And he said that he was, I guess, in New Jersey when it happened. His friend worked in one of the buildings, and his friend had gotten a phone call that morning at like 7 telling him, don't come in. So he was just at home sitting watching television. And the Uber, or not the Uber driver, my Lyft driver, as I stated, he was in the Navy. So he said he started packing for, I guess, off the grid living. Like if he had to leave the city, escape, go to the woods, he knew how to do that. So he packed an emergency bag. And I was also telling him how I remember after September 11th, how the United States just changed so much. I couldn't put my finger on it at the time because I was a child and didn't have that much understanding. But I mean, of all the things the United States has done and been through, I really think we just collectively, or at least the ones who weren't involved and didn't know, we weren't prepared for something like September 11th. It literally caught us off guard. We had never really seen anything like that happen on U.S. soil, unless you count Hawaii, but Hawaii was stolen by the United States. So Pearl Harbor is a whole nother thing, okay? Like, this was just out of the blue, broad daylight, you're going to work, and now there's people jumping from buildings. Like, what the heck? But I said, I remember specifically after that terrible event, how after every single tragedy, people will unite. They'll bond, they'll get close. You can have a happy event unite people, but nothing unites people like a tragedy. When it's a tragedy, there's so much emotion, it goes to the core of your soul. So sometimes your thinking can be clouded with emotions that you wouldn't feel if you were thinking with a logical mind. Everything seems so sporadic. So if the economy was failing, of course it would make sense if a tragedy occurred. I'm not implying that like it was an inside job because I wasn't there. I don't know. I feel like there were a lot of people involved inside of the US and outside of the US. But anyway, but I feel like after that, it did shake up the economy, like you're funding war and all of that. So the Lyft driver said he believed it was an inside job because, as he stated, he was in the Navy. And he stated they always had something on deck, I guess an airplane that could take down planes. Like he didn't understand why they weren't sending anything. He also mentioned like the the votes in Florida and all of that. I'm not very political, but I do kind of vaguely remember what he was talking about. It was like the votes in Florida, and then all of a sudden they forgot. But I just thought it was very interesting that it took this one tragedy to really change how we operate. America was not the same after September 11th. Anyway, he says, what New York and America lost on September 11, 2001 was not only thousands of innocent lives tragically ended, great buildings reduced to rubble, and vibrant businesses blasted into bankruptcy. New York and America lost the deeply held myth of some peculiar, sacrosanct core of invincibility. Defying the horrific events of its own recent history, America had clung to this myth. New Yorkers managed to experience the 1993 World Trade Center bombing had not brought the tower down. In the fullness of time, the perpetrators were brought to justice. The 1997 Oklahoma bombing was far more lethal, with 138 victims compared to the 6 in the World Trade Center bombing. But America assured itself this was a uniquely aberrational domestic crime perpetrated by an American. The nation's mistake was to concentrate on the trials and the punishments of the perpetrators. The crime was to neglect the evidence of American vulnerability. Yes, I agree. I literally agree. Here's another picture of the towers. Oops. Beautiful, gleaming in the sun. I never realized how beautiful the designs of the towers were until I really got up close pictures of them. Because from afar it's just like, okay, these are just like kind of rectangular, the end. But when you see the beauty, the artistry of it, it really makes you appreciate it. This is so sad. The Remainer. So sad. Manhattan before the Twin Towers. So this is Manhattan before the towers were built, and this section, or like I guess this area right here, is where the towers would be. He talks a little bit about life in New York in the 60s. He said to picture New York in its life before the Twin Towers requires revisiting the 60s, the decade before the towers were built. They were completed more than 30 years ago. The North Tower's first tenants moved in 1970, and the South Towers did so in 1971. For a majority of New Yorkers and tri-state area residents, the Twin Towers have always been there, always visible, a lodestar, and an undeniable fact of life. I think that's interesting because when I was watching a lot of first-person accounts, that's what a lot of them said. Like, it was just always in the background. It was always there. And it made me think of things in my life that were always there. Like monuments in my town that is just always there. Of course it's there. It's always been there. The only one I can really think of is the Gateway Arch. The Gateway Arch, I believe, was either started or completed in 1965. It has been there my whole life, the arch. It's like the symbol of St. Louis. It was there before I was born. It was there, I guess, a few years after my mother was born. It's just always been there. I can't imagine the skyline of St. Louis without the Gateway Arch. It would just look strange because when you look at photographs, it's like you have the arch, then you have the little courthouse, and then you just have, it's all layered like a beautiful cake. If I just woke up one day and the arch was gone for some tragic reason, I don't know how I would feel. I'd be like, whoa, this is completely different. The only time I personally felt my city was like really something I didn't recognize was during Ferguson. And it's because I grew up in Ferguson. That's where I spent most of my childhood. I went out to school in St. Charles, St. Peter's, and I lived in Ferguson. So it was just strange to see all of these events happening in my doorstep. And I'm pretty sure it was very crazy for New Yorkers that day to see everything unfold. Because number one, the thing you've looked at every day for, most of your life is gone. You're seeing people's last moments of life. You're seeing just all of this tragedy around you. How can you operate? How can you think? It shakes you to the core. Like what is normal, what is familiar is just ripped away from you. He said, New York did not lack for iconic buildings before the Twin Towers soared 1,360 feet up from their plaza into the heavens. Solid, vibrant Rockefeller Center, largely completed in the 1930s with its mall and flag-studded sunken plaza, was a Is that a firework? Was a major attraction awash with New Yorkers and tourists. Then he goes and talks on and on about like the landscape before. And this is a picture, more pictures of the city. He also mentioned Jackie Kennedy, which I thought I didn't expect to see in this book. He says, only an intensely spirited public protest led by Jacqueline Bouvier Kennedy saved the magnificent Grand Central Terminal, completed in 1913 and famed for its vast barrel-roof main concourse, from a similar fate. Grand Central, now totally restored to its former splendor, is a visitor's must-see destination, drawing millions annually. But he keeps bringing up this financial plight the city was going through. Like, it was really, really suffering. And I didn't know anything about this because, I haven't read much on New York, but it just kind of reminds me of what's happening here in our downtown. Like, our downtown is dying, and they're trying everything in their power to revitalize it. And I'm just like, dude, you need to offer something that people want. You need to offer something that people need, because it's painful watching a city that you live in just dwindle and depreciate. And it's also sends you in a state of panic. Like, half of you wants to save your city, half of you wants to just leave your city. So I can understand what they're going through with this financial crisis. He said no remedies were in sight. Property taxes had been hiked to the bearable maximum and new taxes added to business and personal income. As a result, businesses and residents were beginning to leave New York for more welcoming financial climates. Ooh, you do not want to take your money and leave. He also mentioned the Vietnam War, the demonstrations. There was just a lot going on in the city at the time, and they needed something to really revitalize the New York skyline. So it says the Twin Towers design and architecture. So right here is the architect who designed the Twin Towers. Ironically, he also designed the St. Louis airport. Like, why is it every book I find myself? I find my home in a book. Obviously, I'm never alone. Obviously, we are all connected. He said, 2 days after the September 11th attack on the Twin Towers, Nikolai Orosov, the Los Angeles Times architectural critic, described the construction of the towers as an act of optimism and outlined the unusually strong symbolism of the World Trade Center. So this was designed. A huge increase in the number of commuters was the project's first consequence, so significant that from 1966 on, Governor Nelson Rockefeller pushed for construction of a new city on the water, Battery Park City, with the aim of alleviating travel problems and exploiting the new skyscraper's location. I'm trying to see where it brings this man in. Like, where? Hold on. Raymond Hood, 1881 to 1934, had envisioned in his futuristic master plan, Manhattan 1950, discussion of the World Trade Center project inevitably leads it to its Japanese-American architect, Minoru Yamasaki, 1912 to 1986. Assisted by Emery Roth, whose reputation was made by the World Trade Center project. Architectural historians and critics prefer some of Yamasaki's other major works over the World Trade Center. These include the St. Louis Airport, 1935 to 1955, designed with G.F. Helmuth and J. Lineweber, the Society of Arts and Crafts Building, Detroit, 1958, the American Concrete Institute Building, Detroit, 1959, or the Reynolds Metals Offices, also in Detroit, 1959. The most typical elements of Yamasaki's works are vaults that mask structural elements of the walls, often formed by profiled modules made from concrete or other agglomerates. So it says the World Trade Center was conceived in 1962 and began to take form in 1964. The first construction started in 1966. So let's see. I'm going to skip a few pages ahead. And this is Yamasaki looking at his work. Like, look at his face. Look at how happy he looks. He's looking on models of his work. I just love the satisfaction in his face, the little glint in his eye. You can tell it's an artist just creating his work. And this is him with other engineers and architects talking about what to do. You see? So neat. So it says the tower's distinctive features were geometric divisions, glass walls, and load-bearing columns. The North Tower was completed in 1971 and the South in 1974 when the World Trade Center complex was inaugurated. The towers were roughly 1,360 feet high, 196 feet long on each side, had 110 floors and 104 elevators. They rested on foundations that penetrated 69 feet into bedrock. Construction required 200,000 tons of steel and 3,000 miles of electrical cable to satisfy the daily distribution and consumption of about 80,000 kilowatts. It had 43,000 windows, each one 22 inches wide, 215,000 square feet of glass. I'm like, wow. So these were some of the ideas of what the towers would look like before they decided on the two towers. So this was one. This was one where it was just raised up. And then finally the Twin Towers. And Yamasaki stated that he wanted the Twin Towers to be a living representation of the faith of man in humanity. He produced about 100 models before choosing the two towers, which represented a breakthrough configuration compromise. Now, the reason the towers fell, according to this book, was designed to resist atmospheric agents, seismic events, I guess earthquakes, and even accidental intrusion, including being hit by an airliner. The Twin Towers were unable to withstand the heat caused by the flaming combustion of the 20,000 gallons of jet fuel split into each tower on September 11th. The heat literally detached the concrete-clad floors from the tower's steel core and exterior walls. These having lost their characteristics of resistance and flexibility because of the excessive heat, gave way under the weight of the structure. And I know I mentioned this in one of the books I read last year, how the jet fuel went down the elevators open, and out comes a giant fireball. And then there was also the sound of pounding, which was like the floors just breaking. It's like break, break, break. It's like a pancake. And there was a man that went down with the towers, but he survived. Complete miracle. They call him Miracle Man. This shows the layout of the towers before. You can see the towers and all the buildings surrounding them. It also gives you, hold on. It also gives you an inside view of what it looked like at the bottom as they were constructing. Oops. This just goes on and on and on about that. I think my favorite page is this page. I'm trying not to rip my book. Hold up. Look what my book can do. Wow. It's amazing. Kudos to the publisher for your creativity. I am very inspired. The next chapter, over here are images of the buildings that were damaged, the ones that had structural damages, the ones that were completely destroyed. It's color coded, so look at the colors. Gray is the collapsed building. White is partly collapsed buildings. Or I can't see because some of the colors look the same. Blue is buildings with major damage. Green, buildings with structural damage. Yellow, buildings damaged but stable. A lime green, buildings which need cleaning. And then some gray one that says buildings not affected. There's also a chapter about the World Trade Center and media. How the media really solidified its meaning in the heart of New Yorkers and all around the world. I'm glad that they included an image of this guy. The first time I heard about this man that walked a tightrope between the two towers in the 70s, the first time I heard about him was in a children's book. It was a very nice children's book, but I can't remember what the title is. But this man's name was, what was it? Philippe Petit. a 24-year-old French citizen. He walked August 7th, 1974. He secured a tightrope between the two towers and had made several elegant and seemingly carefree crossings. Boy, I would never. No. No. You won't even get me 8 feet off of the ground. Like, I'm not about to do all of that. No. I don't know how he did it. How he did it and didn't fall. Like, look at him. He's having so much fun. Look, you couldn't even put me on a rope. I would fall to my death. Oh, no. I'm not doing that. Then, it has a guy climbing the side of the tower. July 22nd, 1975, another 24-year-old made a parachute jump from the roof of the North Tower. What is it with all these 20-something-year-olds? Y'all need, when you're 30, you'll see. Or no, I take that back. When you're 89, you'll see. It has a close-up of some sculpture. It also has some scenes from movies. Like, it was featured in King Kong in the 70s. Also a remake. What I really like in this section is I get to see inside. So right here is an art piece by Helen Frankenthaler, a New York painter. And this was mounted in the tower lobby. Then right here, over here, I don't know where this is. Is this 80? The Winter Garden? Maybe that's not the Winter Garden. The Winter Garden. Look at this. It's so beautiful. This is gorgeous. Oh my God. It's so gorgeous. And right here is the Windows on the World, which was a restaurant at the top. And a lot of people, either almost all of them died or a lot of them died. And some of them either jumped out the window or blown out the window. Oh my God, it was so freaking sad. Then it says the new heart of the financial district. It talks about how the towers really changed the financial district. But of course, I'm not into money like that. I couldn't memorize all of this, but it goes into detail. It talks about like the rents, how it changed, like the flow of the money there, how the what do you call it? The public port authority was formed. I do apologize if I'm yawning. It's been a long day. Here's one of the pictures of the tower that I really love, where you can really see how beautifully designed it was. Look at this, so beautiful. So beautiful. So beautiful. Oh. So, right here, little landscape. Mostly near the end of this book, it's pictures, but there is one part where it's dedicated to September 11, 2001. And when you turn the chapter, it there's no words. It's just like pictures of the plane going into the second tower. just stills. This one was a close-up of the plane. And then this one, this book comes open. It goes like that. This is a blast. But I don't know if they zoomed in on video footage or if there was somebody there. I don't know. It says, the flame bursts and plumes of smoke are seared into people's memories worldwide. No event in the history became known throughout the world so quickly or so dramatically, or was so symbolic. The Twin Towers rise 1,360 feet in the center of one of the world's most densely populated cities. Within the hour on that warm, sunny morning, there was nothing that anyone could say that was new or different. TV commenters left no thought unexpressed. People spoke to comfort each other or to break through the numbness that shock produced rather than to make any informative statement. I had asked my mom, because I guess I was so traumatized, I couldn't remember all of September 11th. And this is so strange because I can remember vivid memories from childhood. I can remember people's names, people's phone numbers, people's birthdays. But for some reason that day, I just couldn't remember it. So I had to ask her what happened. I said, did we leave school early? And she said, yeah, we left school early. And they put us on, I guess, lockdown. And she said, there was a lady on the radio screaming on the radio. It was a news lady screaming on the radio. And I could totally see that because sometimes when I go back and I look at clips, like news footage, there'll be people being like, oh my God, like they'll just be like, oh my God. That's all they can say. They have no words. Like, what words can you have? You can't express it. I personally feel one of the worst were the jumpers. And when I was looking at, like footage and interviews, that's what a lot of people said. And I think the jumpers on September 11th was more traumatizing because you're literally watching a person die. You're literally watching them fall to their death, and you can do nothing to stop it. You can't catch them. You can't say, no, don't do it. But you also can't offer an alternative for them to go down. They couldn't go down because their exits were all destroyed. And I did find one documentary. It was, they were interviewing the French brothers that made the documentary about a firefighter. And they were one of the first people that were filming what was going on. But one of the brothers, I don't know if it was one or both, were in the towers. And this was before the tower collapsed. So this was like basically the last video footage of the towers. The last video footage when Father Judge was alive and all of that. And you could just hear this crashing. They kept all of the sounds. And just the thought of just like, that was a person. They knew it was a person. So, of course, you have no words. You have no words. There was too much happening in one day. You have people jumping. You have the building on fire. You're watching an aircraft crash into a building. Now the building's gone. Now the smoke's coming after you. And that's just in one city. And in another city, you have it crashing into like a government building. And then in another city, you have it crashing into a field, a plane. You don't know what's going on. And you're watching it over and over and over and over and over and over and over on television. That's why I couldn't watch TV for weeks after that. Like, it was too overwhelming. I had nothing to say. Nobody had anything to say. There was nothing you could say to fix it. There was nothing you could say to make any sense except, oh my God. That's one phrase I've heard in a lot of the footage, or people just screaming. They couldn't. You're just going to the core of human nature now, the core of fear. The multiple thrust response to the attack showed near miraculous efficiency and focus. The speed of action, the scale of operations, and the courage of all who participated make for a memorable chapter in the nation's history. Is true, because you had those firefighters going in. You had people going in that knew they were going to die, and they just went in anyway. They knew they were going to die, but they went in anyway to try to save people. And when I say more people could have died that day if it weren't for the firefighters and all these others helping them get out, because there was at least 50,000 people in one building, at least, probably, or at least over 20,000. Shoot. But we lost a little, almost 3,000 that day, but there could have been so many more if it hadn't been for the people getting out and being rescued. This ladybug. Go. Has pictures. It's just on fire. It's on fire. And what does the smoke contain? The smoke contains metals, body parts, computer stuff, asbestos, lead, jet fuel. It's just a concoction of toxicity. And that's why a lot of people died years later just from getting the smoke, inhaling the smoke, getting it on their skin. That's why this book was written, for the first responders that were suffering from being at ground zero. Look at this. Like, just imagine you're in, I don't know if it's a hotel, and all this is coming down on you. Like, God help us all. Sometimes I go back and I look at these pictures, and it literally does not seem like this was 21 years ago. I'm not saying the United States was innocent, and maybe I'm looking at it that way because I was a child and everything just seems so innocent. But these people are so frightened. We just got out of the 90s. We're going into the new millennium, and you're running for your life. You're just running. They're running from the smoke. What I feel was really interesting was just like all of these little snowflake looking. It's the dust. But none of them had any masks. None of them had on hazmat. People just injured, covered in dust. A lot of people, as time goes by, the hurt just doesn't go away. It's like I watch it and it hurts all over again. But some people don't understand. especially as like a younger generation, because they were either too little at the time or they weren't even born, but it was a different world. Like, not every, like, we were just starting to get into social media. Like, just imagine if we were just starting to get into social media. Not everybody had cell phones. The phones really weren't that fancy. You couldn't just Facebook and all that, because Facebook didn't exist at the time. You couldn't Instagram it. It was just all news. And a young person looking back would be like, okay, we're just desensitized. We're desensitized to everything because we've experienced so much before and after September 11th. We don't really have a response. It's just another shooting. It's just another bomb. It's just another war. Like, we've almost lost touch with our humanity. But that day forced us, because I'm sure we were going through the same thing at that time, because there were wars and stuff going on. But that day really forced us to get in touch with our own humanity, watching people jump to their deaths, watching people scream for help, and we can't help them. A wave of empathy going throughout. Like, I'm sure if people had wings, they would have flown up there and helped these people. I'm sure if they hadn't been so terrified, they would have run into the building too and gotten them. But fear is what keeps us separated. It's not even hatred. Fear is deeper than hatred, because fear can cause even a caring person to act in an irrational way, because you've gotten to the core of our nature. But what's really scary is ourselves. This is I think it's Father Judge. He was giving last rites, and he ended up dying. But I hope the lesson that we learned from September 11th is to stop fearing one another, to stop being so passive to one another collectively, to get to the core of the problem instead of just treating the symptoms of the issue, getting to the core of the problem, really listening to each other, not becoming desensitized. I think that's the most dangerous one, becoming desensitized to everything. We just shouldn't do that. We need to learn how to feel more. We need to get more in touch with our humanity. So that's all I wanted to share with you all. Thank you for watching this video, and I will talk to you next time.